Good morning, everybody. I have to put my glasses on because I'm now old. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Jake Sherman, as aforementioned, founder of Punchbowl News. Thank you so much for joining us in person and on the live stream for this event. Investing in America with August Pfluger, the Texas Republican chair of the RSC and all-around pretty influential figure on Capitol Hill. Thank you to the American Investment Council for partnering with us to make this event possible. I'll be speaking with Mr. Pfluger about news of the day and how private capital is investing in America. Afterward, I'll be joined by AIC CEO Drew Maloney and the National Venture Capital Association President and CEO Bobby Franklin for a fireside chat. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media platforms at Punchbowl News. Now I'd like to welcome Mr. Pfluger to the stage. Thank you, sir. And the best piece of trivia about you is you're probably the only member of Congress with a town in your state named after your family.
Oh, that is. I didn't think we'd start the morning with that.
I'm sure that's not due to you, but I mean...
But if you go to Austin, Texas, just north, you'll see Pflugerville,
yeah.
And that's the homestead.
Yeah, and I was in a hotel room recently that had a Pflugerville conference room in Austin, so that's good. All right, we're going to start, as we do at all Punchbowl News events, with some news of the day. And there is no news of the day, so I had to dig really deep for these topics. Let's start with, you have the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, coming in to the RSC lunch today. 189-member caucus, the RSC, which is the largest group of members on Capitol Hill. They agree on everything, so your job is very easy. Talk about what you're going to be talking to the Treasury Secretary about.
Well, thank you for the ability to talk about this. Very proud of the Republican Study Committee. My predecessor told me, he said, this is going to be the best hour a week that you will spend on Capitol Hill. And that's been true. The learning, the policy discussion, it's really the only opportunity in the week to talk about policy. So probably nothing to talk about today. When you look at markets and tariffs and where we are, and I'm sure we'll get into that here, but that's what I expect the conversation to be today is Donald Trump was elected to shake things up.
And shaking things up he is.
And he is. And we expect a good discussion with the Treasury Secretary today to talk about some of those goals, to talk about some of the objectives, to get to the point of where are we? Is America going to get a good deal or not? And that's not just here at home. It's obviously abroad. It's in our trading relationships. And I'm sure we'll talk about it, so I won't go into too much detail. But the questions that I think people are going to ask him is, show us the path, and let's talk about the objectives, because we know it's clear in Donald Trump's mind. We understand the president has a clear path that he is looking at. Come communicate to us so that we know what we can be doing. What are the things that we can be solving? What are the legislative vehicles that we can be pursuing? And those are the kind of questions. We've had some great speakers. Secretary of Energy came in and talked to us. We've had many people who are delivering that message, and that is, I think, the most important topic today will probably be on the subject of tariffs.
And what do you have a big district, a very large geographical district in a very large state, a lot of oil and gas, which we'll talk about in a minute, a lot of agriculture, a lot of natural resources. What are you hearing from your constituents about the tariffs?
This is a group of hardworking farmers and ranchers and oil and gas folks. We've got a lot of military personnel. 77 million people cast their vote for Donald Trump. I've got a tremendous amount of conservative folks in my district. We also have a lot of Democrats, so I represent a wide swath of people, but I think that they trust what's happening here. There's instability in the markets, okay? What my district would say is, everybody calm down. It's going to be okay. Look at what happened in the first term. You did have a downturn in the markets initially when he started to enact his plan. We're reordering a system, a global system that has been in place since World War II. And if you think about it that way, a couple of weeks of reordering and instability, okay, if we can get back to getting a good deal, my constituents would tell you, on the one hand, we trust what he's doing. We want to see the outcome of it. He deserves the opportunity to do the things that he's doing. I looked at crude oil this morning. The price of it was $55. So on the other hand, they want to see, anybody who studies these markets, I mean, there is a sweet spot for oil and gas. And the price of gasoline at the pump is not directly correlated anymore. This is not the 1970s to a barrel of oil. So that sweet spot's probably 65 to 85. That's what they're looking for, predictability. So yes, they want to get through the turbulent times, but they want to see what he does to restructure, reorder, and make trade better for us, for the district that is literally providing 45% of the country's crude oil. That's what my district does.
It's a lot. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to ask one last question on News of the Day topics. The House Republican Conference is in the midst of trying to pass a budget resolution that would unlock this process to cut taxes, cut spending, and enact the vast majority, 90-something% probably, of the president's domestic policy agenda. What is going on? Are we going to see that on the floor this week? Is it going to pass? You think it'll be here next week? What's your sense?
Well, I'm very proud of what the House did a few weeks ago. I think the needle that we threaded of saying and acknowledging that $35 trillion in debt is not sustainable, of looking at the things that Doge-type people are looking at, the inefficiencies, and acknowledging that we've got to do something, but also that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that Donald Trump passed in the first term, we cannot let these expire. We have to extend these. And there's a huge desire and an appetite within our conference. So we were able to thread that needle on both sides, both on the conservative side, people who $1.5 trillion was not near enough for them, for the fiscal hawks, and also those that maybe have more challenging districts who are like, hold on, $1.5 trillion, that's a lot of money. So I'm very proud of what we did. Understand where the Senate is and why they've done what they've done. But Jake, I think, this is a tough one for the Speaker. I trust what Speaker Johnson is doing and the leadership that he has demonstrated, the ability to bring people together. I do think this probably goes forward for a vote. I think it's going to be tough. I really do. I can get to yes with the assurances that we're actually going to garner some savings. The Republican Study Committee has been instrumental in driving a message that says any bill that we get to has to be deficit reducing. We have to look the American public in the eye and give you the confidence that we care about this, that we actually care about extending those tax cuts and doing the things for our children, for our grandchildren, that we leave them a better country. So I can get there. I'm hopeful that we move this process along because winning is fun. I think we've gotten a taste of winning with a couple of different things lately. Let's keep that going. But there's a lot of questions out there right now.
Let's move on to Texas and private investment. Texas has become, and I'm not just saying this because it's my wife's home state and I get brownie points for saying so, but a magnet for private investment. We've seen companies from all over the country move to Texas, international businesses as well. Why is your state and your district so attractive to private equity and private business and private enterprise?
How long do I have on this answer?
About 5 seconds. No, I'm kidding.
Do you ever walk into a room and not know somebody's from Texas?
No.
It happens.
I always tell my wife, it's a great state. I get it. Move on.
Well, it's like, how do you know a fighter pilot's in the room? Don't worry. They'll tell you, immediately. I love Texas. Love being from there. It's pro-business. It's pro-family. It's the regulatory nature goes back to us being a nation, and that is just leave us alone. We can do this, and I think that is true today, where people see that environment and they know whether you're a semiconductor company, an oil and gas company, any of the new tech startups. I mean, look at the AI data centers that are coming into West Texas to harness the energy we have. So I think it's a business environment, it's an attitude, it's an ability to raise your family. These folks that are looking at it going, oh yeah, that's a really nice place to go be and raise a family. So I think it has to do with all of that. But I think the most important thing is that when companies come to Texas and they start or they continue the operations, they succeed. They make money for their investors. They make money for their company. They add to our GDP. And it's because of those factors that I just outlined. And success just breeds this desire to be there. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of people. Now, I will say, there is always that concern, like, hold on, don't bring your voting habits from places like California into Texas. We do say that, but it's a great place to live and start a business.
So your district runs, it's a big part of the state, as I said. It runs from north of Austin all the way west to Odessa, includes the Permian Basin, includes a lot of oil country. Are there specific projects, companies in your district that help explain some of these dynamics, some of these economic dynamics that you're talking about?
Sure. Innovation is the name of the game. What the oil and gas companies have done is they have figured out how to produce affordable, reliable energy. And they've done it, I mean, if I were to tell you the innovation of just drilling in general, but I think it's just this idea that they can figure it out. They can make it happen. And I'll go back to World War II. We were having a problem fighting Nazi Germany. They had figured out better technology in their airplanes. And again, as a pilot, I paid attention to this. What the oil and gas companies did in my district in Midland, Texas, was they figured out how to make higher octane fuel. And they put that fuel in the P-51, and that really, the performance on the aircraft we had was able to turn the tide. So yes, these companies are constantly innovating. They're constantly doing things better. I'm proud to represent them.
And besides energy, what other sectors are you seeing private capital and investment grow in your district and across Texas?
Across Texas, I would say the AI, the data centers, the payment processing centers, they're coming to Texas because of the energy that they have access to, because of the LNG. They can build a data center in West Texas. There's land, it's available, and then they can really get on the grid very quickly for a cheaper energy price than you could imagine. We have 80 to 85 gigawatts of demand right now, and what ERCOT, our grid operator, is telling us is that's going to be 150 gigawatts by 2030, 5 years from now.
It's a big
so
story,
that's
yeah.
why these folks are coming, and that the energy demands are going to be incredible throughout the U.S. We've got access to affordable and reliable energy.
Many of these energy deals that happen in your state and across oil country in America rely on the limited partner, general partner model. Why does this work? I mean, and you'll be dealing a lot with this in the tax bill and as you go forward in the next couple of weeks and months, maybe years, why this structure works and why it's so common in these partnerships.
This takes advantage of a couple of things. Private investment, especially in energy, in the last 6 to 7 years has been the name of the game. The banks left the energy sector for the most part because of ESG, because of other factors. So all these private investors got together and they realized that they could do it quicker, they could do it with less regulations, they could skip the government regulatory nature. And there's provisions like carried interest and other things that are really important to these guys because they want to see activity. They want to see the demand that they are servicing continue. So these are big provisions that we're working through that I'm incredibly in favor of.
So carried interest, let's put a pin in that for a second. That's every time there's a tax bill, very frequently we hear about carried interest when we talk about taxes and the treatment of some tax situations when it comes to private investment and things like that. It is a big part of, as you said, how general partners are incentivized in these deals. The Trump administration wants to eliminate it, has said they want to eliminate it. It sounds like you do not agree with that provision.
I think that this has been fundamental to the energy sector. It's been fundamental to the investment we've seen, the fact that we are now energy dominant. And I get where they're coming from. I understand that that's a long-standing point of view, but for us, I think we just need an educational moment to talk about what has happened in the Permian Basin, what has happened in the energy sector, and I think with that education, my colleagues could really get to the point where they understand it.
We'll start the education now. So how does it drive, in your view, innovation and risk-taking in energy? Because we've heard the education on some of the other sectors of the economy that are sectors of corporate America that use carried interest, but how does it drive innovation and risk-taking in the energy sector?
So when the banks decided through the ESG movement that they were not going to invest in energy, that specifically in hydrocarbons, specifically in oil and gas, because they demonized this growth, where we know that We're not in a transition, we're in expansion. And you may disagree with that, but that's my perspective. We've seen it time and again. The only source of investment out there was private money flowing from people. These weren't, this wasn't Wall Street. This wasn't,
Right.
These were people that got together that used this mechanism because they were incentivized to keep putting capital. Drilling is extremely capital intensive. It takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of money, and you have to be incentivized in some way through the tax code, specifically here, just like an R&D tax credit, just like any other incentive that you continue to invest. We are only energy dominant because of provisions like carried interest in the Permian Basin.
So general and limited partners in these energy deals have enjoyed tax parity, both treated as capital gains for some time. Why has that balance been important in the energy sector?
Again, I think it just goes back to the incentive that they continue to invest. It's very capital intensive. They want to keep putting money into it. But if you're not having a return on investment, and by the way, I think that's where we are on having predictability. You see the markets in a downturn because they want predictability. It's the same thing through the tax code, which is the Senate wanting to make permanent these provisions in the tax code. I agree with. We have to make sure we pay for it, but these limited partnerships have dominated the structures in places like West Texas.
Recent changes have started taxing general partners at a higher rate and than limited partners. What's your take on how that affects the balance and how it affects entrepreneurs in energy and beyond?
That's a great question for Jason Smith.
Yeah.
Defer and deflect to the Ways and Means Committee.
That's a courtesy that you're giving your Ways and Means chair.
And by the way, he's doing an awesome job. I think probably the structure has, I highlighted limited partnerships. That really has been the dominant form. So to your point, if you see less incentive, you're going to go to the mechanism, the organization where you get maximum benefit.
Let's talk about some of your roles on Capitol Hill. You're chair of the Republican Future Caucus, so you could tell the future, very good to know, and the RSC. So you're in a unique position to shape GOP priorities. How do you talk about how you're going to use those roles on issues like private investment and economic growth, and what is the RSC's role like even more broadly as we get into, I think people are right now rightfully focused on the budget and on this hurdle that will unlock reconciliation, and forget that after the budget is passed, you still have a long, long road to get Trump's agenda enacted. So talk about what that's going to look like for the RSC and for you.
We're already at work on this. And again, we've got 189 members. That covers geographically every area of the country. Ideologically, we have folks that are in Main Street and in the House Freedom Caucus, which is, there's no other organization like it. We've already been at work bringing people like Jason Smith, Brett Guthrie, Jody Arrington, committee chairmen who are going to be marking these bills up to our organization to educate our members. Number two, Treasury Secretary is going to be, our guest speaker today, and he is going to talk about the things that are important to the White House. So we are really the convergence, the one-stop shop for policy from within, from what we're doing within the House, as well as from the administration. And Jake, the other thing is we work very closely with the Senate. Before we had the CR vote, have you ever seen a Republican Study Committee chair put out an affirming statement on a year-long CR?
No.
Never. Which I did. And the reason we did, because we knew at that point in time that was the only move, stabilize things, get to reconciliation. We brought Susan Collins in. Susan Collins and Tom Cole sat next to me. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was on the other side. And we had a conversation, and I'm not sure the Senate was there. And I'm not saying that lunch was the deciding point, but I don't know.
You should just take credit for it.
I don't know of any other lunch that had those people, the chair of the House Appropriations and the Senate Appropriations and the Speaker. And we had a discussion, and by the end of the discussion, I think Senator Collins was like, oh yeah, I guess this year-long CR is the only option. So those are the kind of things that we have done. And there's a lot of great groups that are out there. We just happen to have all the ideological mix of the conference. And we still care about being the conservative conscience of the conference. That's really the driving factor. So
we have to wrap it up in a second. I'm getting the hook in a second. But I want to ask you So you've heard a lot of ideas there's a lot of ideas from the Trump administration that you agree with. I'd say 98%. And then there's ideas like carried interest. There's ideas like raising the top tax rate, hiking taxes on folks who are making more than $1 million, which a lot of Republicans don't agree with. I'd say the vast majority of Republicans don't agree with. How do you handle those, and how do you handle pushing back on that in the House before they, you've been in the House long enough, not too long, but long enough to know that you have to be forceful before things barrel out of control, especially with a president as popular as Donald Trump. So how do you counter those kinds of tax increases on folks from the seat at the RSC?
Well, I'll answer it in this way. If you wait till the last minute to plan in the House, then it's not going to work.
Seen that many times.
You have to get ahead of it. And the RSC is that group where we are doing things. I mean, we could spend 2 hours here talking about the initiatives that we have, outside organizations on scoring, to counter what CBO is doing. But let me just say, President Trump may operate in an unorthodox manner, and he may stir things up and shake things up, but everybody just calm down, because the restructuring needs to happen. And I don't disagree on where he's trying to go. In fact, I agree wholeheartedly. There may be provisions, and guess what? I may come off of my beliefs because you hear what he's saying and you go, oh, okay, that's why you're doing it. And I'd say 99 out of 100 times, as you mentioned, 98 to 99%, that's what we have done, is we've believed that he's got a good plan for it. There's not a lot of disagreement. He is an unorthodox person. He creates leverage through the chaos of reordering things. We need a shakeup. We need it here. We need it abroad. I've seen it. I've lived abroad, and he's doing that.
Mr. Pfluger, thank you very much. We're going to reset the stage for what I promise will be, I've been promised 15 seconds, and come back with our next two guests. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Sorry.
That was literally 15 seconds.
That was actually less than 15 seconds, so that's great. So welcome to the stage Drew Maloney of AIC and Bobby Franklin of the National Venture Capital Association. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. You don't have towns named after you in your home state, so I can't go with that.
Not yet.
No.
Maybe.
Give us time.
We can aspire to
Yeah,
that.
I guess so. Give us a sense, both of you guys. I know what your organizations do, but give us a sense of just what you do and how you operate in D.C.
Yeah, well, at the American Investment Council, we're the largest private equity and private credit trade association in town, and we represent, hundreds of investors out there who pool capital and invest in businesses across the country. And most people don't appreciate that the size of the businesses we invest in, about 85% of all of our money goes to small businesses. So in towns and communities across America, private capital, private equity is helping these businesses thrive and grow. And we need this capital. And I think, as the congressman just suggested, it's doing amazing things in the energy sector. It's doing amazing things in the AI and tech sector, which Bobby can talk more about. But across the entire economy, we are really focused on investing in communities that we work in.
And private credit and private equity are two huge. I mean, private credit is, you can't turn on the news without seeing the explosion in that field. Bobby, we'll give you the stage now.
So NVCA has been around over 50 years now, and representing the venture capital investors who really, kind of the birth of it was in the 1970s, about the time the NVCA was created. And they work alongside the entrepreneurs in ways that many times policymakers don't understand. So that's why NVCA exists, to help policymakers understand, where do big, great companies come from? Where does the innovation happen? If you look at the market cap, so the valuation of the top companies in the world, 7 out of 10 the most valuable companies in the world started with a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur here in the United States.
And here on the stage, too, because that's how we started.
There you go. And one day you'll be one of the most valuable.
Yes. Your mouth to God's ears. Let's dig into policy. Drew, we just talked about this. The White House has floated changing the tax treatment of carried interests from capital gains to ordinary income. This is something that is a big issue for you, and I'm sure you're spending zero time thinking about this. And I'm kidding. You're spending a lot of time on this. Talk about that and how it would impact the industry.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at one of the most consequential legislative and administration achievements in 2017 and the last Trump term, it was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
And we should say that you were involved in that.
Right. I was at the Treasury Department at the time, and it was one of the most amazing achievements because what it did, it created these pro-growth policies that allowed investment to increase, wages increased, more revenues came to the Treasury, all after these policies. And it's our belief that during that time they struck a balance on the 3-year hold on carried interest, that was the right balance. And we're very supportive of an extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act as is. If you look back at when it passed to today, the private equity industry's invested more than $5 trillion in the economy. And as I said, 85% of those dollars are going to small business. The second largest investment is the reshoring of manufacturing. A big chunk of our money is going to manufacturing. We believe those pro-growth policies have to continue, and you'll see that continued growth in the economy if they do it that way.
So you've spent years at AIC showing how private equity strengthens retirement savings. If carried interest taxes go up, how does that ripple out? I mean, help people understand or describe how that impacts everyday people.
Yeah, well, the more you tax something, the less there is of it. And that's really the fundamental. We just recently put out a study that talked about how taking away carried interest, what the impacts that would be on the economy. If you look at it, first of all, it would lose $70 billion in revenue to the Treasury. That's not the right way we need to go now. So that's the first point. The second point is you'd lose more than 1 million jobs. And that's also not the right way you want to go because there's going to be less investment dollars out there. And I think the third point to make on that is if you take the tax rate from 23.8% to 40.8%, you're going to become a global outlier. I mean, Canada is going down to the 20s, China's at 20%, Europe's at a lower rate than all that. One of the reasons that America is the best place to attract money and capital is because we have these pro-growth policies. And I think at the end of this tax policy and this tax process, that you will see policymakers want to return to that. And that's why I'm very optimistic that we will stick to the carried interest capital gains rate and not become a global outlier.
Bobby, venture capital is all about high risk and high reward. Now, with Punchbowl News, it wasn't high risk for anybody because we were sure to succeed. But anyway, I'm sure there are other companies for which it's high risk. How does carried interest encourage VCs to take those big swings and fuel innovation?
Well, first of all, carried interest really is just an agreement between the limited partner and the general partner, right? That if we're successful and having that alignment, like the congressman was talking about, having that alignment of interest between the limited partner who's providing most of the capital and the general partner who's doing all the work. And in the case of venture, it hits all the sort of asset classes a little bit differently. In the case of venture, you got to understand, venture is the longest horizon.
For sure.
I mean, you're starting with, the proverbial 2 people, a dog in a garage.
Right.
With a PowerPoint deck, maybe.
Maybe.
And then you're trying to sort of build it into one of the most valuable companies in the world.
Right.
And that's what we've seen happen over and over again. And so when you have that alignment of interest, it all works really well. So if you suddenly say, I'm going to increase the tax rate on what is the only economic incentive for venture capitalists. Now, why can I say that? The median-sized venture fund in all of the U.S. in 2024 was $21.3 million. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, and if you're a shark on Shark Tank, it's your own money. If you're a venture capital investor, it's somebody else's that you have to make an investment. And the way a 2 and 20 model works is basically you have 2% of that to pay for all that it takes, lawyers, accountants, due diligence, travel, office rent, everything else. At that rate, the median size funds, so half of the funds in the US, you're likely not even taking a salary. So your only economic incentive is carried interest. So imagine working for, on average, 8 years on a lot of portfolio companies. There's no guarantee it's going to win. In fact, there's studies that show 75% of venture capital investors and investments go to zero.
Yep.
It's the power law. It's the 25% that hit, and you hope they hit really big, that make up the difference. So there's no guarantee you get this. So it's not like some bonus that they talk about. It's like a real risky endeavor. And if suddenly you were taxed at ordinary income rate, like Drew said, you tax it, you get less of it. Why would you take all of the risk to wait 8 years to see if it materialized? You'd go get a job where you could pay ordinary income rate and get rewarded on a yearly basis. So that's where you see less investment happening if the tax rate is almost doubled, and as Drew said, goes to one of the highest of any industrialized country or any country.
I think that's what a lot of people, just as a side note, don't understand about private investment, venture capital, private equity, or venture capital mostly, is that it's not, you're not picking out of 100 companies, you're not picking 99 winners. You're taking humongous risk on 75% in your view. I think that's probably right, of your investments. I mean, it's a big risk. And you've called carried interest a recognition of sweat equity when a VC firm invests in a startup. How does that sweat equity show up, and why does the tax treatment, I mean, go a little bit deeper behind the tax treatment matters in that respect?
So if you think about what a venture capitalist does, you just said, you don't just make an investment, sit back and watch. In fact,
that'd be nice though, wouldn't it?
Well, for some, but you know, the reality is that entrepreneurs that are starting companies, many times it's the first time they've ever done that. Now there's some repeat entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs, but for the most part, it's the first time they've ever done it. A venture capitalist has seen this over and over. They've seen the mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're trying to start, grow, and scale a significant business, and so they can help them navigate. You look at research, and it says that almost 2/3 of venture capitalists are in touch with their portfolio company on a weekly basis. Yep. 70% of the activities that they're doing are directly related to helping those portfolio companies succeed. So they are very much putting the sweat equity. And they're not getting compensated from the company. Right. They're getting compensated 8 years down the road if it's one of the 25% that made it,
right,
and didn't fail. And so again,
you're trying to drag a lot of these folks across the finish line in a lot of senses.
100%.
Yeah.
And you're having to make very difficult decisions. You're bringing your experience, your expertise, your Rolodex, that's an old term, your phone,
cell phone,
contacts. But you're basically working very hard to make sure that company succeeds.
If carried interest were taxed as income instead of capital gains, Drew, I'll throw this to you. Give us a sense, just play that world out. What would we see in terms of innovation in the startup world?
No, I mean, I think Bobby can speak more to the startup world, but I think that's the area. Well, I think what you see is the smaller firms, the smaller investments, the more risky investments won't be made because you know you won't get the return. You know, one of the things, as Bobby said, like, you don't get a carried interest if the company doesn't succeed.
Right.
So you're going to only start going to safer companies. And then those more risky companies, and some of those risky companies could have been Uber, could have been Google. You don't know what they were back then, but now they're like flourishing companies. And
combine that with the crunch of access to capital kind of more broadly for startups, that'll be a tough.
It's very tough. It's very tough. And I think also to Bobby's point, is one of the things that both venture and private equity firms do is they partner with these businesses. I mean, we're living in, very, uncertain times, with tariffs and everything like that. So, all of our operating partners are working together with these businesses to figure out how do you manage through these different times. And they're all trying to work together to make sure that the companies grow and flourish. And, I think that's a big difference than just you go to the bank and you get a loan and you hope for the best.
Let me just add one thing, Jake. If you were sitting down with the congressman, you're saying, okay, let's do a whiteboard exercise. Let's think about tax policy from the standpoint of the taxpayer. I would argue that I'd be hard pressed to imagine a better tax policy than one that says, in the case thinking about venture is the taxpayer they get all of the benefit before there's any rate decided. So for that 8 years when you're building that company, they got net new job creation, they got new innovations, they helped the US remain competitive with the rest of the world, they drove GDP. All of that had to happen before there was a carried interest to begin with. So it's only after the taxpayer got all of the benefits, the country got all of the benefits, there's this question about what should the tax rate be over that success story. And then it's completely in line with capital gains tax policy. And you didn't hold it only 1 year. In our case now, as a result of the 2017, you have to hold it 3 years. And by the way, there's pain in the industry because of that in certain unique circumstances. But you're holding it 8, 9 years. And then suddenly that's supposed to be treated differently than what everybody else enjoys by making an investment, holding it just a year.
Right. Yeah. Drew, Bobby, I could talk about this all day, and I'm sure I actually will be going to the Hill and talking about these things all day, but we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, and big thank you to Mr. Pfluger, Congressman August Pfluger, and the American Investment Council for making this conversation possible. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more news and more. I'm sure there'll be a lot of news today at punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe, everyone.
Right.